Welcome to Forbidden Desires channel. We hope you will have fun with us. Enjoy watching. It was just past midnight, the kind of midnight where everything feels heavier than usual. The house was completely still, not a single sound, except for the occasional CRE and the old wooden floorboards. Beneath the silence, you know that kind of quiet, the one that feels thick, like it's wrapping around your chest, squeezing. Everyone was asleep. At least I thought they were. I was lying there in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. My thoughts had been eating at me for weeks, maybe months. I don't even know anymore. Time blurs when you're emotionally drained, when you feel invisible, when the people closest to you stop seeing you. And then a knock, soft, barely there, just 3 little taps, tap, tap, tap. But I felt it echo in my bones. I remember how my stomach dropped, like my body knew something before my mind even had time to catch up. I pulled the covers back, walked barefoot across the cold floor, heart thudding in my ears, and opened the door. And there he was. My little brother standing there in the dim hallway, light shoulders, slumped eyes, wide lips trembling like he'd been holding something back for too long. And then he asked me something I will never forget for as long as I live, something that froze me in place and melted everything I thought I understood about the lines we're not supposed to cross. What he asked next shook me to my core. I wish I could sit here and tell you I had the right words, that I made the right choice, that I stayed strong. But the truth is I didn't. I was weak, I was human. I was hurting. And now I carry the weight of that night with me everywhere I go, like a shadow that never quite disappears, even in the brightest light. Some things you can't undo. Some moments, they mark you forever. Before I take you deep into this emotional journey, I just want to say this. Please subscribe to Forbidden Desires. If you're someone who understands the messy side of being human, before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more captivating true confessions like this one. Don't forget to watch till the end and hit the like button to show your support. If you've ever felt lonely, unseen, or torn between what's right and what feels real in the moment, this channel is for you. Like this video, share it if it hits close to home, and drop a comment below. Tell me what you think, what you feel, because I really need to know. I'm not the only one who's been here now. Let me tell you how it all started. I'm 33. I never thought I'd be back in my childhood home at this age, but life has a way of pulling the rug from under you when you least expect it. My marriage, it fell apart. Piece by piece, not with explosions, not with screaming, just quiet distance, slow silence. Nights spent lying next to someone who didn't look at me the same anymore. When it ended, I didn't even cry, not right away. I packed a few bags, told myself it was temporary, and moved back into my mother's house. The rooms felt smaller than I remembered, the walls thinner, the air heavier. My old bedroom was being used for storage, so I stayed in the guest room down the hall, just a mattress on the floor, a single lamp, and a window that looked out onto the backyard where my childhood memories had once lived. It wasn't just me in the house, though my mother still working late nights as a nurse, my stepdad, quiet and tired most of the time, and then there was my half-brother. He's 20, tall, lean, always wearing those worn-out hoodies with the sleeves pulled over his hands. He was born from my father's second marriage, a marriage I never fully accepted. While growing up, we didn't grow up together. He came into my life when I was already a teenager trying to figure myself out. By the time he was old enough to speak in full sentences, I was off to college. So for years we were strangers sharing a last name. When I moved back in, I didn't think much about him. He was quiet, polite, barely spoke, less spoken to. But there was something about his presence. Something different. He didn't ask me questions or try to make small talk. But when I passed him in the hallway, he looked at me, not just glanced, but really looked like he could see right through the version of me I was pretending to be. The house was crowded, but it felt empty. Everyone was going through their routines, keeping to themselves. My mother left early, came home late. My stepdad watched the news, barely acknowledged me, and two floated from room to room, from one overthinking spiral to another. The only time I felt grounded was those random moments when I'd find my brother in the kitchen late at night, pouring cereal or heating up leftovers. He never asked why I was awake. He just nodded, sometimes offered me a bowl of what he was eating. Sometimes we sat in silence. Sometimes he said something quietly funny, and I'd really laugh for the first time all day. One night I sat across from him at the table. The light overhead buzzed softly. The room smelled like old coffee and leftover takeout. He looked up at me and asked, "Are you okay?" That question? It hit me harder than anything anyone else had said in months because he meant it. There was no pity, no agenda, just a genuine question from someone who somehow knew I wasn't. I found myself opening up slowly, a little more. Each time I told him about the nights I spent crying into my pillow. When my husband didn't come home, I told him how small I felt when I tried to talk and got met with silence. I told him how I started to forget what my own voice sounded like. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix it. He just listened. There's something powerful about being listened to without judgment, especially when you're broken, especially when you feel like no one else sees you anymore. I started looking forward to those moments with him. Those late-night run-ins, those quiet exchanges in the dim hallway, the way his eyes softened when I spoke. The way his shoulders relaxed when I let out a shaky breath. There was one night, a cold one, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones even when you're inside the heater wasn't working right. I was curled up in bed with 3 blankets, still shivering. Power had gone out for a second and flickered back on. I heard movement in the hallway, then a soft knock. It was him again. He stood there with a spare blanket in his arms, didn't say anything, just handed it to me and turned to walk away. I don't know what came over me, but I said, "Wait." He turned back, and in the silence that followed, I felt something shift between us, something unspoken, something quiet but undeniable. 3 people under one roof, lost in different ways, but somehow finding each other in the spaces where no one else looked. That night changed everything, not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. Not yet. That evening started like any other dinner, was simple. My mom made something quick. Pasta. Think, with garlic bread that burned just a little on the edges. We all sat around the table, the LED TV playing quietly in the background, no big conversations, just the usual half-hearted updates, my stepdad talking about his aching knees, my mom reminding him of an upcoming doctor's appointment, my brother barely saying a word, just poking at his food, headphones dangling from around his neck. I remember watching him from across the table, the way he kept his head down, nodding when spoken to but never really inserting himself. Struck me how familiar that looked, that silence, that quiet shrinking of yourself when you feel like there's no space for you in the room. After dinner, everyone slowly disappeared to their corners of the house. My mom headed to bed early. She had the night shift off but was still exhausted. My stepdad fell asleep in front of the LED TV as usual, the remote dropped to the floor. Sometime around 9, I went to my room. It was one of those nights where the world feels like it's holding its breath. You know, the air was thick with something I couldn't name. I curled under my blanket, phone in hand, scrolling aimlessly, looking for something, anything to distract me. But everything just felt empty. And then it happened again, that knock, soft, careful. Just like before. I didn't say anything. First, I just looked at the door. My heart already knew who it was. Then his voice came through the wood. "Hey, can we talk?" "I can't sleep." I paused, not out of hesitation, but because I wasn't sure I trusted myself. I stood up anyway and opened the door. He looked tired, not just physically, but deep down in his eyes, like something had been building up inside him, waiting for a safe place to land. I nodded, stepped aside. He came in, sat on the edge of the bed. I sat beside him, not too close, not too far, just there. First we didn't say anything, just sat in the stillness, and then softly, he said, "Sometimes I feel like I don't exist to them." His voice cracked a little. I looked at him like I could disappear and no one would notice. Mom's always busy, Dad just wants me to act like a man. Whatever that means. I try to talk and it's like I'm invisible. His words hit me right in the chest because I knew that feeling too well. "I know what that's like." I whispered. "It's like you're screaming inside, but all anyone hears is silence." He nodded, and in that moment we were no longer just siblings, no longer just a man and a woman separated by age and title. We were three broken people sitting in the middle of a world that never seemed to have enough space for our pain. And then after a pause, he said, "Can I just stay here tonight? I feel safer near you." I looked at him. It wasn't the words that got me. It was the way he said them, the way his voice trembled like he was asking for something more than just a place to rest, like he was asking for connection, for warmth, for someone to not push him away. I should have said no. I should have told him it wasn't appropriate or that he had his own room. But I didn't. I looked into his eyes and I saw myself, not the woman I showed the world, but the girl who used to cry herself to sleep. The girl who never felt chosen, the girl who longed to be held without having to beg for it. So I nodded okay. He didn't smile. He didn't move right away. He just breathed like he'd been holding it in for far too long. I gave him a pillow. He laid down on one side of the bed. I turned off the lamp and laid down on the other. There was a space between us, a respectful, careful space. But even in the dark I could feel his presence. I could hear his breath. I could sense the weight he'd been carrying now resting somewhere near me. Felt innocent, almost maternal, but it also felt like something else, something I couldn't name. The room was quiet. The world outside had fallen away. It was just the three of us in the hush of night, breathing in the same rhythm, and somewhere deep in that stillness, I felt something shift, not in him and me. We lay there back to back under the same blanket. There was enough space between us for breath, for boundaries, but not enough to keep the thoughts out of my head. I stared into the darkness, my eyes wide open, tracing the ceiling in my mind, even though I couldn't see it. Every tiny sound, the ticking clock, the rustle of the blanket, the slow rise and fall of his breathing was louder than it should have been. And still I didn't move. His presence calmed me, and I hated that it did, but it also scared me in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't him. I feared it was the version of myself that had started to show up whenever he was near. I told myself it was nothing. He's family, he's lonely. I'm lonely. That's all this is, but that voice in my head, the one that's always tried to protect me, it whispered something else. Something I didn't want to hear that night. Under that blanket, the quiet between us stretched longer than the hours that passed, and then his arm shifted slightly, not toward me, just repositioning, but it brushed mine, light, accidental, innocent, maybe. But the moment his skin touched mine, something sparked under my own, not lust, not desire, something deeper, like recognition, as if my body remembered something it was never supposed to know. I closed my eyes tightly, hoping to escape the thought, but it didn't go away. Instead, my mind wandered back to cold nights in my marriage, back to lying in bed beside a man who couldn't even be bothered to reach for me, back to all those days where I begged for eye contact, for tenderness, for the kind of touch that said, "I see you. I choose you," but all I got was silence and distance, and this slow erasure of myself that no one else noticed, not even me, until I was already gone. I remember the last time my husband kissed me. It wasn't even a kiss, really. It was routine, empty, a gesture without meaning. His lips barely touched mine, and then he was out the door, already halfway into a phone call with someone more important. I stood there that day holding a coffee cup, my mouth still cold from the absence. And I remember thinking, is this what I've become, an afterthought? So maybe that's why his presence now, this boy who was technically my brother yet felt like the only person in the house who could see me, was shaking something loose inside me. Maybe it wasn't wrong. Maybe it was just tragic. Maybe being needed was more intoxicating than being loved, because love had disappointed me. Love had broken me, but being needed, that was different. He listened when I spoke. He looked at me like I mattered, like I had weight, like I wasn't just drifting. And in that dark room, I started to wonder if comfort was the only real thing I had left. Was it so bad to take it? Even if it came in a form that the world would never understand, even if the comfort blurred lines I didn't know I was capable of crossing. I stayed awake the whole night, staring into the darkness, listening to his breath, feeling him near me, not moving, just there. And I hated how safe that made me feel, because I knew safety could be deceiving, especially when it comes wrapped in warmth. you haven't felt in years, especially when it arrives in the form of someone you're not supposed to need. The next night he came back. It was almost the same time, just after midnight. The house again was wrapped in silence. That strange kind of stillness that only happens when everyone's asleep and the world outside forgets to move another knock. This time it didn't startle me. If anything, I was waiting for it. I opened the door and there he was, same hoodie, same tired eyes. But this time there was something softer in his face, something almost expectant. He didn't ask to come in. He just said, "Can I stay again just to talk?" I nodded. He came in, sat cross-legged on the bed, and I joined him. This time it didn't feel strange. It felt familiar, like some silent routine was forming between us. One we never planned, one we never spoke about, but it was there, and so we talked about everything about nothing. He told me things he'd never said to anyone else. His childhood fears, how he used to lie awake, listening to our dad and his mom argue behind closed doors, how he hated school because he never felt smart enough, how sometimes when it got really quiet, he wondered if people would notice if he just stopped showing up. I listened not because I was trying to help, but because I wanted to understand him, and I told him my own secrets too. I told him about the time I sat in my car for 3 hours after finding out my husband had been texting another woman, and I couldn't even cry. I just stared at the steering wheel. Numb. I told him how I once went a full week without speaking a single word to anyone, and not one person noticed. We cried quietly, separately, but together. Somewhere in that space between confession and comfort, something unspoken bloomed. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't physical, it was emotional intimacy, the kind that sneaks up on you, the kind that binds people without them even realizing it's happening. Night after night he returned, and night after night I let him in. Some nights we talked until dawn. Some nights we just lay there, not touching, not speaking, just existing in each other's presence. But then slowly the dynamic shifted. It was subtle. One night I reached over to brush a piece of hair from his face. It was innocent. At least it started that way. But my hand lingered a moment too long. My fingers traced his temple gently, like I was trying to memorize something I wasn't supposed to touch. He didn't flinch, he didn't pull away, he just looked at me. And I looked back. Then I turned away. Heart thudding, breath shallow. The next day, I noticed something different in how he moved around me. He hovered closer in the kitchen, walked slower when we passed in the hallway. His eyes, they stayed on me longer, studying me, protecting me. First I brushed it off, told myself I was imagining it. But then my stepdad made a sharp comment at dinner one night, something sarcastic, something small, but it cut me. Before I could respond, he stepped in. My brother, voice low, steady, "Don't talk to her like that." Everyone fell quiet. I didn't say a word, but inside I was shaking. No one had defended me like that in years. Later that night, I found him outside on the porch, hoodie up, arms folded. He didn't say anything. When I sat next to him, I looked at him, and for a moment I saw something in his expression I hadn't dared to name before: possession, not in a controlling way, but in the way someone looks at a person they do anything to keep safe. We didn't talk that night, just sat under the quiet hum of the porch light. But when we got back inside, when I reached for the blanket, ready to settle into our usual sides of the bed, he did something different. He reached out gently, slowly, and placed his hand over mine. No words, no question, just that. His hand was warm, steady, and mine didn't move, not right away. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, could feel my breath. Catch could feel the moment stretching between us like a thread pulled tight. I knew I should have pulled away, but I didn't. I sat there, hand beneath his, trying to convince myself it was comfort, trying not to admit how much I needed it, how much I didn't want it to stop. The 7th night felt different. The air was heavy. In a way, I couldn't explain. The kind of weight that clings to your skin, settles on your chest, makes it hard to breathe. Outside, the wind hauled through the trees, leaves scraped across the windows like restless fingers. The forecast had mentioned a storm, but it felt like it had already arrived even before a drop of rain fell. There was a full moon glowing through the clouds, casting pale light across the hallway. As I opened the door, he didn't knock. This time he was just standing there like he knew I'd be waiting, and I was. I stepped aside, he walked in, neither of us spoke. We sat on the bed closer, this time not touching but no longer keeping space between us like we had before. There was a hum in the air, not just from the storm building outside, but from something stirring between us, something we hadn't acknowledged, something we couldn't keep pretending wasn't there. The lights flickered the room, dimmed, then brightened again, like the house itself was holding its breath. He looked over at me, really looked, and I could see it in his eyes, on his face. That same confusion, that same I'd been carrying for days now. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Can I tell you something?" I nodded. He hesitated, swallowed hard, his hand twisted in his lap. Then in a voice that cracked at the edges, he said, "I think I care about you more than I should." The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy, dangerous, impossible to ignore. I felt my breath catch, my chest tightened, my pulse roared in my ears. For a moment I couldn't speak, and then I whispered, "Don't say that, please," but we didn't move apart. We didn't look away. The storm outside began to crack, thunder rolling low across the sky, lightning flashing in the distance inside. It was just us, three people sitting far too close saying things we weren't supposed to say. I didn't know if I was trembling because of what he said or because part of me wanted to hear it, needed to hear it, because somewhere deep in the wreckage of my life, being cared for, even in the wrong way, felt like oxygen. We didn't kiss, we didn't touch, but we didn't need to. His eyes stayed on me for too long. My breath brushed against his skin. We laid down. Eventually the bed felt smaller that night, or maybe we just took up more space in it. He turned onto his side. So did I. I felt his breath at the nape of my neck, warm, slow, unsteady. My heart was pounding, not out of fear, but out of knowing what was happening, knowing what wasn't being said, and knowing we were right there on the edge of something we couldn't take back. He didn't try to hold me. I didn't ask him to move. We just lay there too close, too. Aware sleep came eventually, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of sleep where your body rests, but your mind won't stop whispering. And when the sun started to rise, when the sky turned pale and the storm moved on, I already knew a line hadn't been crossed, not entirely, but it had been touched, and everything felt different. Now the next morning was quiet, not just normal quiet, not the kind of hush you get on a sleepy Sunday when everyone's still in bed. This was different. This was chilling, the air felt thick, every sound was sharp, my footsteps on the floor, the creak of a door, the hum of the fridge. Even the birds outside felt like they were holding back. I got up before him, slipped out of bed like I was doing something wrong, even though nothing had happened, not really, not technically, but everything in me knew something had. When I came back from the bathroom, he was gone. His side of the bed still slightly warm, the blanket created where he'd been lying. He didn't leave a note, didn't say goodbye, and I didn't see him for the rest of that morning. At lunch, we sat at the same table with the rest of the family. My mom, my stepdad, a neighbor who had dropped by for something. He sat across from me, and for the first time in days he wouldn't look at me. Not once. He kept his eyes on his plate, gave short answers when spoken to, and when our mother asked if he was okay, he forced a smile so tight it barely looked human. I said nothing, but inside I was unraveling. Something between us had cracked or shifted or broken completely, and no one else in that room noticed except me and maybe him. Later that night I waited, same time, same quiet house, same empty bed, but there was no knock. The next night, nothing, and the one after that I started spiraling in silence. Every small sound made me flinch. I kept glancing at the door like a ghost might appear behind it. I checked my phone constantly, even though I had no reason to. We didn't text, we never needed to, but I kept hoping I'd scroll through old messages from friends just to distract myself. Tap between apps like it might make him appear. He didn't. It's wild how fast something can shift, how closeness can turn to distance without a word, how someone who made you feel seen can suddenly act like you're invisible. It wrecked me. I tried to act normal, smiled at dinner, washed dishes, answered when spoken to. But every part of me was listening for him. And then one afternoon I heard his voice from down the hallway. His door was cracked. He was on the phone. I didn't mean to stop and listen, but I did. His tone was soft, gentle. I hadn't heard him speak like that since our last real night together. And then I heard her name, a girl's name, not someone from the family, not a cousin or classmate, just someone. He laughed. Low and quiet, said something about meeting up later, something about her, making him feel like himself again. I didn't hear the rest because by then my stomach had already twisted into knots. I stepped away from the door, back into my room, and sat on the edge of the bed, the same bed where we once sat, once shared silence and stories and something so fragile. I don't even know what to call it. It didn't matter anymore, whatever. We were whatever was forming between us. He closed the door on it without telling me, and I was left sitting in the echo of it, wondering if he regretted everything or if he simply didn't need it anymore, didn't need me anymore. And if I was being honest, what hurt the most wasn't the silence. It was the fact that for a brief, dangerous moment, I thought I was the only one who made him feel that way. I couldn't stop thinking about it, not just him, not just that night, but everything that led up to it. Every silence, every ache I ignored. Every time I told myself I was fine when I wasn't. I kept replaying it in my head, his voice in the dark, his hand on mine, the way his breath felt on my skin, the way he looked at me like I was something worth protecting, and how easily that look disappeared. And the more I sat with it, the more I started to ask myself things I didn't want to ask. Was I craving love or power? Did I want to be seen? Or did I want to be desired? Or was I just projecting all my pain onto the one person who didn't run away? When I finally opened up, I told myself it wasn't that deep, but it was. I knew it was because what we shared, what almost happened, wasn't just about the three of us in a room. It was about everything that came before it, the years of being unheard, the emotional starvation, the slow disappearance of myself in someone else's shadow. He was just there when no one else was. And maybe that's what made it dangerous. I started writing again, just a few lines at first. A habit I used to have when I was younger before life got too busy, before I stopped paying attention to my own thoughts. And one night, sitting on the floor with a pen that barely worked and a journal I hadn't touched in years, I wrote that night didn't change him, it changed me because it did. He walked away. He found someone else to talk to laugh with, to share his nights with. But I was the one who stayed behind, carrying the weight of what almost happened, carrying the guilt, the shame, the confusion. I wasn't even sure who I was anymore. I used to think I was strong, resilient, grounded. But now I wasn't sure if I had just been numb all along, mistaking silence for strength, confusing self-sacrifice with love. I wondered if I hadn't been so lonely, would it have happened if someone had held me sooner? If someone had truly seen me, would I have ever let it get that far? I wanted to believe I was better than what happened, that it was just a moment, just a wound. Just a glitch in my judgment. But even now I don't know. I don't know if I did something wrong or if I was just wrong to begin with. I keep trying to draw a line between what's forgivable and what's not, between what we can chalk up to loneliness and what we carry forever. And the more I try, the blurrier it gets, because even after all the silence, even after the door stopped knocking, there's a part of me that still feels something when I think about him. Not romance, not longing, just this hollow ache, like something got torn out of me quietly and never quite grew back. Maybe that's the real wound, not the almost, but the aftermath. I never thought I'd feel that way about someone I